Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for what is now a season-ending edition of Inside the Zone after an unfruitful trip.
So we can all go outside the zone then, huh?
We can. We'll get a tan outside the zone because it's starting to heat up out there. Unfortunately, it didn't heat up for the Komets down in Allen. They lose 2 of 3 to lose the series, 4 games to 1 in the Western Conference Finals. I just want to get your first reaction, just a takeaway of what you saw this past week from the Komets as the series came to an end.
We saw the same things we saw the rest of the year. I mean, the inability to control the penalties and to live in the moment and to understand the moment of playoff hockey, what it's like, really cost them. They ended up beating themselves in a way.
And this was something that we've talked about throughout the year. You heard Gary talk about it. Anytime you interviewed Gary at practice or after a game, disciplined, don't take bad penalties. Those were recurring themes. So how surprised or not surprised are you that it kind of reared its ugly head at this point in the season?
Well, Glenn, like we talked about, you knew what was going to beat them sometime if they didn't get it under control, and it did beat them. I mean, they really did beat themselves with it. That's the worst part of it, is there's so many times where this whole series was a microcosm of the season because they really did beat themselves with their inability to control it.
When you take a look at special teams, didn't play particularly well on special teams against Allen, specifically the last couple of games. What do you take away from that? Is that just a small sample size, or is that something that's reflective of what you saw throughout the regular season?
I think Allen was a really bad matchup for them that way. The Americans were not that big, but they were sure fast. And they moved the puck fast. They moved the puck faster than the Komets could move the defensemen on the penalty kill. And if the forwards aren't willing to block shots, and some of them weren't, as Gary said after Saturday's game, what are you going to do? Because the defense on the Komets was big, but it was not very mobile. And so they couldn't always get over to block the shot or to get to there, especially with Beaupre out. You know, I mean, it really limited the options the Komets had, and that's where Allen feasted.
And reading one of your articles, you were saying that the Komets defensemen maybe were not as fast. And
no, they're not as mobile.
Not as mobile as you'd like them to be. Going forward, what are some of the things that you learn now watching them play a championship team like Allen that they can apply to next year in terms of building this team? I mean, is it finding – they always talk about finding big defensemen, but is it finding speedier defensemen? I mean, what do you learn that you can apply to next year's roster?
Well, I think the Western Conference is different than the East. In the East, the Komets' size would have been overwhelming maybe, would have been really solid, might have been more of a factor. In the West, it's more speed, it seems like. You know, look who are the biggest teams in the West: Colorado, Rapid City, and the Komets. And Colorado and Rapid City didn't make the playoffs. So maybe that's something to consider. I don't know. I mean, I haven't had a chance to talk to Gary or David Franke about that yet. But it's going to be interesting to see what playing in the West, how that affects things on the roster versus playing in the East, because there is a difference.
We always talked about the discipline. How do you make that a focus in the offseason? Can you?
Right. I don't know, because if you look at it, I mean, what did Gary do in that situation? He talked about it constantly. He talked to the guys. He benched guys. I mean, that's why Garrett Mears didn't play after the first 2 games or the third game. He didn't play against Utah. You know, I mean, there were guys that he did talk, and Garrett got the message, you know, and you look at it, the 2 guys in the regular season who had the most trouble with it were Garrett and Cody, and they both got the message. Why didn't the rest of them get the message? I mean, you know, why? It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And you could say, well, it's a young thing, but it wasn't just the young guys getting all the penalties. It was the older guys, too. It's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what playoff hockey's like.
This is sort of a blanket statement, but in your eyes, was this a successful season for the Komets?
Yeah, it was. They won the division, and they went to the second round, they actually went to the third round. But I think winning the division and getting past the first round should be the goal every year, which it's amazing how few teams actually do that. You realize the Komets they're the only team in the last 3 years that's made it into the second round. I mean, that's mind-boggling if you think about it that way. That should always be their basic goal. And then because everything else is out of your control. You don't know what your affiliate's going to have. You don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. You don't know how much they're going to load you up. It's all these things that are out of your control. Is your opponent in the first round going to have 15 guys back from the AHL? You don't know. And there's nothing you can do about that. So basically, my thought is that the Komets' goal should always be win the division and try to get past the first round. If you do that, you're always going to be in contention, and you're going to be a legitimate contender for a title just by having consistency. Other than that, there's nothing else you can control. So I don't know what you do about it.
Gary Graham likely to be back, I would guess, for next season. There's no reason to believe that he wouldn't be. What does he do to build on this as a coach and to build the momentum with the Komets? Because in this league, there's so much turnover. Different guys get sent down.
So much out of your control.
Every week. But he'll be one of the constants for the Komets. So how does he talked about after the game, Game 5 on Sunday, about how they raised the bar this year and the expectations were higher. How does he take that now to the next level? What does he do to further this Komets franchise?
Well, I think part of it, and I've seen Gary grow tremendously this year. When they went through that road trip to Alaska, Colorado, Rapid City, and he somehow kept them all together by just throwing pieces on the ice, essentially, that was amazing. And I felt like he really grew during the playoffs, too. I mean, up until the last game, everybody he put in was really successful and really contributed well. And that didn't work so well the last game. But, I mean, up until then, they wouldn't have got there without that. So I think Gary's going to continue to keep getting better and keep growing. I mean, that's what he's done the last 3 years. So I expect that to continue. I just was so impressed this year with the way his maturity has improved and the way he deals and relates with the guys. And I don't know, I just feel like he's going to keep getting better. He's still got room to grow, and he's still hungry to grow, too. He's not like he's resting on his laurels at all.
Thursday, we've got the annual charity auction, the jersey auction. So we know that's coming up in the offseason. But what does the rest of the timeline of the offseason look like? When do the Komets start to figure out who's coming back, who's not coming back, what type of players they need to address to try to bring in? I mean, what's the timeline?
Oh, I think they've already started.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. They're not waiting around. I think first off, I think what they do is they look at guys who might be free agents on other teams. Maybe there's somebody who was here, and I don't know anything specifically, but maybe there's a couple guys who've been here in the past they'd like to have back. Maybe their contracts are up somewhere else, and they might go after them. I mean, I could throw names out there, but it doesn't. There's nothing behind them. I think they look at you really look at the guys that they brought in at the end of the season who played well. Taylor Cronk, David Friedman, some of them. I think you look at Simone Pepin. I think you look at him. I mean, you look at some of those guys and you start from there. And what you really do is you go through the exit interviews with the players. That's where they sit down and they talk with the players about how did you think the season went. It's just a good give and take. And a lot of times they'll find out then if a guy wants to come back or not, or if they want to retire, or if they want to go to Europe and that kind of thing. It kind of gives you a head start on what you've got.
And I think some of those guys, Taylor Krug, some of the younger guys that they brought in at the end are trying to be next year's Kyle Thomas to a certain degree.
Oh, exactly. Without a doubt. And I'd like to see Kyle come back, too. I mean, if he improves as much next year as he did this year, wow, look out.
Obviously, you don't know any names, but are there any guys, last year at this point, we were speculating about Kaylee Schrock. Would he retire? Would he come back? What was his situation? Are there any guys that you kind of get that vibe from now that maybe it's not going to happen next year? Maybe we're not going to see him back in a Komets uniform because they're calling it a career, not because they're not wanted.
Right.
But because
or they might just try to go to Europe where they can cash in and make some more money.
Yeah, you always have a good feel on that. So.
Well, thanks. No pressure.
Yeah. So now that we're live to tape, I need you to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't shock me to see the veterans all change. It really wouldn't. I mean, and I'm not saying that certain guys need to be called out or anything, but it just wouldn't surprise you because the money is so good in Europe. It's so hard to turn down if you have a chance to make significant money over there. It's just, I could see Sidlowski or Mbach again or Jordan Southorn again going over there. I could see Cody Soul going over there. I mean, he played really, really well in the playoffs. And that's that's part of the advantage and the benefits of doing that, too, is the chance to go overseas and really make significantly more money than you can make in the ECHL. None of that would surprise me.
To wrap up the season, how would you describe, kind of in a nutshell, what the 2015-2016 season was for the Komets?
I think this was the year where the fans started to really accept and understand that the ECHL is different. That there are so many things that are out of your control that you can't do anything about. That when you do have a winning team and you do have a team that makes it 2 rounds in the playoffs, you don't take that for granted. I mean, it really made me appreciate what they did in winning the 2012 Central Hockey League title. I mean, it really further emphasized how hard that was. And because this league is so much harder, because there's so many things out of your control that you can't do anything about. I mean, look at Utah losing their goalie after the first game. You know, I don't know that he would have turned the series around, but it would have made it a lot tougher series.
It wouldn't have hurt their chances.
Right. I mean, it's just so much out of your control that you're kind of just rolling with it. It's like, okay, you can get upset that they didn't do better against Allen and stuff, but you know, the Allen folks are saying that was the toughest opponent they've faced so far, in a way. I mean, okay, I buy that, but it's like it's such a rebuilding process every year. It's so hard to start over from scratch and then try to build chemistry and build continuity. And sometimes you can't. You just simply can't. There's nothing you can do about it because it's not up to you. It's up to your affiliate.
Final question, what's next for Blake Sebring? I mean, because the hockey season is so long, 8 months, do you like hibernate for 4 months now? Like, will we see you in a cave sleeping? What's the situation?
Yeah, I'll do some of that. I'll do a lot of that. I've got 2 books I'm working on. One, I'm 80% done. I got to finish that up. And then the next one will be a hockey book again. So hopefully that'll be something for people to look forward to.
And then you can write my memoir.
Well, there you go.
Ghostwriter.
There you go.
Very short. It's called a short story.
I think more people will be interested in Jessica's memoirs, but you know, that's just details.
Hey, that's what the internet is for. Let the people speculate because they can't be wrong. Well, we appreciate you coming in here every Monday throughout the hockey season to talk Inside the Zone, talk Komets hockey with us. It's been a pleasure. You've probably forgotten more Komets knowledge walking into the studio than I will ever have. So I very much appreciate it.
You do a very good job of preparing, that's for sure.
All I get to do is ask the questions, so it's kind of like an opportunity to be a fan and ask you those questions. So I don't know. I just read your articles. I read the articles, and I try to pay attention. That's my life. Well, we appreciate it, Blake, and hopefully we'll have you back.
It was fun.
Yep. Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll be talking again next season, Komets hockey on Inside the Zone.